1990, I went out on speaking tours, speaking engagements, and I spoke in those days for about an hour and a half, and it was kind of scripted, because that was the way you did it. And then one day, very early on, I kind of realized that I wasn't even referring to the script. So what's the point in having it? And when you get rid of the script, that is a major, if you like, psychological moment, because what you're saying is, I'm not frightened of running out of things to say. See, a lot of people, when they stand in front of an audience, they are frightened of drying. They're frightened of forgetting things. They're frightened of not having enough to say. And that fear breaks the flow, the natural flow of consciousness into speech, of insight into speech. And once you get rid of the script and you put that aside and you walk out there and you say, look, I know that I'm going to know what to say and I'm going to have things to say, so it's not a problem. And it just flows out of you. I mean, I start sentences which have names and dates in it, and those names and dates are not in my mind when I start the sentence.
Amazing.
Necessarily.
Amazing.
But I know they're coming. Now, if I worried about whether they were coming, that's going to squeeze the flow. So, and also, why I love doing it so much is because when I step onto the stage, there's an energy that surrounds me, which is just fantastic to experience, and it's like not quite being in a bubble, but it's like being partly in another reality. And it's just a wonderful thing to experience, and it just comes out, and it's just a joy to do. But if I feared that it wouldn't come out, then it wouldn't be the same, because I'd be in fear of something, and thus I would be blocking my ability to do it. So I just go out and have a ball because I love it.
Speaking of that, I watched your little thing about Prince. And fascinating. It was great. But at the end of it, I'm going to throw you under the bus a little bit, if you don't mind. At the end of it, you said this quote, which was just fantastic. You said, "Those who danced were thought to be quite insane by those who could not hear the music."
Yeah.
And I have to ask you, did you dance at the Prince concert?
I had a bop, as we say. Yes, absolutely. Because you couldn't not. As I said in that video, Jimmy, it was an experience in terms of music I'd never had before, right, where someone comes on the stage and the music starts, and it doesn't stop until he walks off 2 hours later, and you're moving and transitioning from one type of music to another, from one situation to another, and it's like there is no transition. It's just seamless. And that guy was tuned into something that he became a vehicle for, and it was amazing to experience.
One of the things that, and you brought this up in that video, and I've also spoken about it on the show, which is, we're at a position now with media and being able to interact and know so much about, our heroes in music and film and stuff. But they're also getting aged, right? And when we're at a point where, we lose Bowie and we lose Prince, who were very, very similar in their dynamic, right? Very similar. And also their effect on so many different types of fans, right? Those guys affected rock and dance and industrial and new age and everything. But consciously around the world, people were stunned, and the consciousness and the effect that they had on everybody was dramatic. And listening to you and your advice in your Prince video on dealing with this, what can you share with the audience when it comes to, some people are heroes, and you refrain from calling Prince a god. And I really appreciated that outlook, because some people may hold these heroes up a little bit too high, and then it affects them emotionally. What is the advice that you can give?
Well, in my books and on this world tour, I will be weaving together a massive number of subjects, which on the face of it don't fit and don't connect, but absolutely do when you put the pieces together. So I will be talking about how the few control the many, to what end, how deep it goes, the background to it, and exposing that. Because if we do not expose the problem and the techniques used to manipulate us, then there are no, quote, solutions, because you can't find solutions to something that you don't know exists, or you don't know how it works. So that's absolutely, I'm going to be doing that. But the foundation, Jimmy, of everything that I've done and where I've actually always come from is the nature of reality, the nature of consciousness. And when I started 26 years ago, I got into this because I started to understand that reality was not like we were told it was. And I wanted to understand why that very credible information was not being discussed in schools, was not being discussed in the media, etc. And asking that question opened up this massive panorama of global manipulation that goes deep, deep in the rabbit hole. So that whole idea of who we are, where we are, has been the theme, the thread through everything, and will be through this world tour. And so in answer to the question, this is a time for people to start looking at themselves for answers, looking at themselves for an understanding of the nature of who they are and what we're experiencing. So instead of looking outside of themselves to quote heroes and to people to tell them what to do, tell them what to think, it's a time to start looking the other way. And that's not to say that we shouldn't respect absolutely these great people who do great work and make a great contribution to things like music and understanding. But it's different. There's a difference between respect and adulation to the point where you're giving your power to someone else. And for me, the great understanding that will change everything is when people realize that we are awareness, a state of being aware. That's it. We are infinite awareness. And the question is, how aware are we going to allow ourselves to be? Are we going to be aware enough just to perceive the five sense world and interact with it? Because that's what this conspiracy wants. It wants us locked only in five sense reality and disconnected from an influence of the greater self. And so if we're going to find solutions to what is going on, those solutions, I would suggest, have to involve removing the cause of the problem. And the cause of the problem is that people have their perceptions of self and the world systematically programmed throughout their lives. They are manipulated to focus their attention only on the five senses and the reality they can see, touch, taste, and hear, etc. And to give their power away to others because they're so focused in the five sense reality that they have lost an understanding of how powerful they really are, the infinite nature and the infinite power that everyone has. And therefore, when people fall into the five sense, what I call phantom self of I have no power, I'm just little me, they then look to others to protect them, to tell them what to think, to guide them. And it's this process of giving power away. So what I would say is absolutely respect people that make a great contribution. And round of applause to them. And, great what they do. But you are infinite awareness, exactly the same as anyone else, exactly the same as anyone you hold on a pedestal. And for me, it's time to start realizing who we are, but where we are, the nature of the reality we're interacting with, so that we can start to impact upon it instead of having it constantly impact upon us. So we're reacting to the world instead of us making a difference and making an impact on the world ourselves. I have this line I've used for years, live life and don't let life live you, which is the kind of, the theme of what I've just been talking about. So this is a time of awakening from the program, awakening from the perception downloads that we're given from cradle to grave, and awakening to the understanding that, the body is a vehicle. The five sense world is an illusory vehicle for a certain kind of experience. It's not who we are. What we call ourselves, our name, our life story, our race, our color, all these labels are merely experiences. They're not what we are. They're not who we are. We are infinite awareness having those experiences. And what the foundation of this system is to get us to perceive what we're experiencing as who we are. And once we fall for that, once we fall for who we are is Ethel down the store, Joe who works in the office, then what can we perceive about ourselves except limitation? I can't, because the world of five sense experience, if that's all it is constantly telling us that everything is limited, virtually everything's impossible. And once you move your self-identity from phantom self, the fake self that we're told to believe in, to infinite self, infinite awareness, having that experience, everything changes. And you start to realize that there is no little me except in the figment of manipulated imagination.
Last year, your old friend Robert Perala and I were at lunch talking about you, right? And at this lunch, I had said to Robert, I said, the thing is about David is he has forced me to open my eyes and just look around and look at things differently. And some of these things have come to pass. And Robert's like, exactly, it's trippy. And I said, exact. But the one thing that David hasn't done is stood on a soapbox and yelled, "I told you so." Instead, I feel that you continue to work on the vision and the message instead of stopping and looking at the past and saying, aha, I told you so, and focus the message back onto yourself. Why is that?
Well, the five sense information, the names, dates, places, manipulated wars, manipulated terrorist events, manipulated banking scams, that is the movie screen. That's what we see and what we experience. And it's important to get that information out because it affects and directly impacts upon the world that people daily experience. And so I've done a lot of that. And when you have an agenda for the world and nothing intervenes to impact and change that agenda, then that agenda is going to unfold. So people like Aldous Huxley and George Orwell, Eric Blair as he was called, they were able to write books, 1984 and Brave New World, etc., that have proved to be so accurate in terms of the world that we now see, because they had access to this agenda, this projected transformation of the world that this hidden hand is behind. And so when I've been able to say this is what is planned and it's happened, it's not because I'm some genius. It's because I've managed to access what the projected agenda is. And thus, if nothing impacts upon it, it's going to happen. The whole point of what I do is to alert people to it, so it will be impacted upon and will no longer unfold. The idea is not to be proved right. It's actually, in the end, to be proved wrong, because it doesn't happen, because we've impacted upon that agenda, that unfolding process of ever greater control. And so when I say, things like, I said this in 1990 or 1995, and it's now happened. That's not to say, look at me, isn't it fantastic? And aren't I wonderful? It's to say, look, if I knew about that in 1995 and it's now happening, how the heck can anyone write it off as a random event? If I knew about it in 1995 and it's happening now, it had to have been planned to happen. And so this, that, and the other. So it's not about, sitting cross-legged on a mountain saying, look at me, aren't I fantastic? It's about doing whatever you can to alert people to the fact that unfolding world events, on the society-changing ones, especially, are not random. They're not just happening out of nowhere. They're planned to happen. Now, the next level of that is who's planning them, and then we can go deeper into it. And the other thing that comes from that, and I've seen it so often, is, and this takes us into where we really need to go, is, hold on a minute, if the world's not like I thought it was in this example and on that subject and in this area, then what the heck else have I been told that's not true? And then we can start going deeper into where we really need to go, which is the nature of reality, the nature of self, and also, as I've done in Phantom Self, explaining how this program download works, so that people can appreciate why en masse people believe what they do about themselves, the world events, reality, all of it. It's because there is a program that is unfolding from when we leave the womb onwards to download to us a sense of reality that suits this agenda. And it's all based on believing in 5 sense reality and believing in the world that we're told to believe in. And of course, you just look at the way the program works. You come out of the womb. Now you are influenced by parents in terms of your perceptions, who have been through the process you're just about to go through. It's not because your parents are malevolent. It's not because they're trying to sell you a lie. They have been sold a lie, and they're passing it on to you. And it's so, when you just take a breath and take a step back and look at it, within 3 years now, 4 years after coming to this world, people, little children, are sitting at a desk with an authority figure in front of them in a school who is telling them what's right, what's wrong, what's possible, what's impossible, how things are, how everything is, when they have to be there, when they can leave, when they can eat, when they can talk. And then this goes on through to what we call higher education, when now young people get into much of their lifetime in debt to pay for their own programming. And you have the state, the system, and that behind the system, having control of what young people and children are told about the world, are told about everything throughout their formative years. And then people go out at the end of this and they go into what we call adult world of jobs, and They become lawyers and scientists and doctors and journalists and politicians. And they take with them this core programming, perception programming, that they've been downloading all through their life from almost the moment they came into this world. And they then run the institutions that are telling people in general how everything is. And they underpin each other and they support each other in the sense of, yes, the program is right, or they don't realize it's a program. The perception you believe in and everyone believes in is right. So if a journalist is doing a medical story, he won't go to an alternative practitioner who maybe have been studying that subject, for decades. He'll go to a doctor because the doctors know about health. No one else does. That's what the program says. That if they're talking about reality or doing an article about reality, they won't come to someone like me. They'll go to a scientist, and the scientist will give them the program song sheet on the nature of reality. And so it goes on. And this is the program, this perception program, the perception deception that has to be broken. Because once we do that, people see the world in a very different way. Well, I've been saying for quite a few years now that I felt 2016, 2017, 2018 were pivotal years in where this goes, both in terms of people awakening to see the world as it really is. And certainly, Jimmy, when I think what it was like in 1990 when I started this journey consciously compared with now, I mean, it's dreamland now because so many more people are open to things they would have laughed at and dismissed in 1990. But on the other side, at this pivotal time, we've got the hidden hand pushing on more and more along this agenda of total human control. So we can see the good things that are happening, but we can also see how this agenda is pushing on. And I said a few years ago that there'll come a time, because there has to, when all that's been hidden and manipulated under the surface must break the surface so we can see it. Because if you are seeking to transform the world into a very different place, there comes a point where things have to start happening in front of people's eyes for that transformed world to come into manifestation. And so we're also at this point now, not only when people are beginning to awaken to other things they never thought of before and didn't see before, but it's becoming more and more blatant, which in a way is helping that process of awakening. And when you look now at the American political elections, the farce, I mean, it's like, it's in your face. There's not a single candidate with any chance of winning that is anything but going to continue this whole process that's gone through Republican presidencies and through Democratic presidencies. Even though they say different things, that the outcome is that the same agenda continues to unfold. In many ways, I mean, Barack Obama did people a favor. He didn't mean to, but in the sense that I remember I was in America quite a lot at the time. No one could have presented themselves as someone who was different to what had gone before, i.e. the Bush administration, etc., than Barack Obama. I mean, 3 or 4 times in a sentence, the word change was coming out. And so it gave people a certain hope. I remember when I was writing articles at the time about Obama being the emperor's, new clothes and just a fake in terms of what he was saying and what he would do, that I got a lot of stick for that, a lot of criticism for that. But what 8 years on, you can see that basically what's happened, although the rhetoric has changed, it's been a continuation of what was before. I mean, when you've got a situation, Jimmy, where the so-called neocons behind the Republican Party, although, the Republican Democrats, they're just masks on the same face, come out with a list of countries in September 2000 that they want to, quote, regime change. And when that group came to power with the Bush administration, that list started to be ticked off. They ticked off Iraq, etc. And then when Mr. Change came in, who was so different to what had gone before, he continued to tick off the list, including Libya and Syria. I mean, it's just a continuation. It's just the presentation that is slightly different, and the rhetoric is slightly different, to try to kid you that actually this is not a seamless continuation with a hidden hand behind it. What you have is the neocons, so-called, behind the Republican Party, and you have a similar group behind the Democrat Party, which I call the democons. And the democons and the neocons at the next stage, the next step down the rabbit hole, if you like, answer to the same masters, the same force. So whoever's in power, that force is always in power, although it's masked by moving from Democrat to Republican and back again. And now you have a situation where Hillary Clinton, who I've been tracking for most of the last 25 years, I mean, she's a massive insider and vehicle asset of this hidden hand. And then you have Donald Trump, who is at the moment the person who's most prominent in apparently being against her. But again, you look at Trump's background and it leads into the same hidden hand and the same characters. You had Trump yesterday talking about, or maybe it was your today, talking about foreign policy and how basically Israel right or wrong. And there you have Hillary Clinton, Israel right or wrong. See, when there's a hidden hand that's unfolding an agenda, but you don't want people to know that, or they'd say, hold on, what's going on? Then you have to keep couching it in different terms and through different people. But in the outcome, it remains the same. So is Trump talking about sending the boys in to sort out the enemy? Well, that's what they've been doing through the Bush administration and through the Obama administration. What's different? And so we have this situation where they have to hide the continuity, the unity, the same process of unfolding events to the same end by couching it in different terms. So over the last 8 years and in his first election, it was the first black president, Mr. Change. Now we have it's couched in, here's a truly independent man, Donald Trump. He's not part of the establishment. You don't become a billionaire with all the requirements of being acceptable to the hidden hand controlled financial system. If you're independent and you're a kind of renegade against the system, it doesn't happen. But it's couched in different terms, and basically they're selling the same agenda, just using different packages and different people.
Why is fear so effective?
Well, when people fall into the trap of fear, they instinctively look for something or someone to protect them from what they've been manipulated to fear. Another thing about fear, because in the end, we can talk about the things we can see, touch, and taste, but in the end, this world is a projection from the unseen. Of other energetic levels and energetic states of consciousness, energetic information fields. And when we fall for fear, something else happens. Our energetic field starts to not solidify, but you get what I'm saying. It starts to vibrate slower. It starts to go into density. And when it goes into density, what you are doing is basically energetically, you're going into a shell. And as you go into it, your ability to access the true self, infinite awareness, gets blocked by the fact that you are moving into this energetic bubble we call fear. I mean, people say, "Oh, I feel so heavy today," and anxiety. I feel so heavy. Yes, people feel heavy because their energy field is starting to move into density instead of being free flowing and out there, able to connect with much higher frequencies of awareness. And so fear serves this agenda on so many levels. On the level that we can see, it serves magnificently this process I've been talking about for all these years, which I call problem, reaction, solution. You create a problem, which you manufacture. It could be a terrorist event, it could be a banking crash, whatever.
A virus.
You then get the public to react to that event with fear and anxiety, and basically either say, do something about this problem, or become open to suggestion of how the problem can be dealt with. And then at stage 3, having created the problem and got the reaction, do something, and got the reaction of fear, you then offer the solutions to the problems you've created, which are changes in society that advance your agenda. So fear is actually, Jimmy, the currency of this whole conspiracy. It's getting people into states of fear. And when you can get people into fearing other people or other groups, becoming suspicious of other groups and other people, that also plays out as another classic requirement of the few controlling the many, and that is divide and rule. And we're seeing all these things being played out in the world, and certainly in the current American election campaign. And this is why, in the end, it comes back. Everything must come back to self-identity, not with the body and the name and phantom self, which is so easy to manipulate because it's disconnected from the influence of true self, eternal self, infinite awareness self, and coming back to a self-identity that I am infinite awareness having an experience. That stops people getting pulled in to anything like the same extent, pulled into the fear and anxiety of the situation, the experience that's happening. Because if you come back to I am infinite awareness, well, what's the worst thing? The worst thing that can happen. I'm infinite awareness, I'm eternal. I'm having an experience. I'll be having another experience shortly. The experience is just that. It's not forever. It's not something that will never change. It's just an experience, and you can observe it from the point of view of being infinite awareness in a very different way to being pulled into it, and therefore pulled into the fear of what's going on, and oh my goodness me, what's going to happen next, oh my goodness. It's a very different way of looking at the world. So you can look at things that are horrible, that would normally create fear and anxiety, but you can not detach from them, but you can stand back and you can put them in context, instead of getting pulled into them and believing that there's nothing we can do, but also that the whole thing is unchangeable. It's not. It's an experience, and there'll be other experiences along eventually, and getting pulled into to phantom self is a foundation requirement of this whole conspiracy, because if people are in self-identity of infinite self, they are so different in the way they see the world, the way they see how the dots connect, because they're looking from another perspective, another point of attention, a much more expanded one, so you can see the dots, you can see the pixels, and you can see how the pixels are actually a picture. When you're pulled into phantom self and you're only perceiving through the five senses, all you can see is dots, all you can see is pictures, all you can see is apparently random things happening and bewildering things. And why is that happening? And oh God, this is happening now. What's going on? It's so important that people re-self-identify with being infinite awareness and see the world from that expanded view, because everything then changes, and so does the way we react or don't react to situations. So if there's a terrorist event, instead of getting pulled into it, oh my goodness me, I'm frightened to go out. I mean, I'm aware of people who after that Paris terrorist event are literally terrified to leave their home. Not in Paris, in Britain, nowhere near any thing that a terrorist would be interested in, but it's so hit them, they're terrified to leave their home. And so if we get caught in that way, not necessarily that extreme, but in that whole arena of fear, then we become open to be told how we're going to be protected from the fear, and we give our freedoms away and we give our privacy away, because I don't want to, but we've got to sort this problem out. When you're coming from a point of view of infinite awareness, observing the world rather than being caught in it, then when these events happen, you calmly are looking at it and asking, well, okay, does this official story stand up? What are the contradictions in it? What really happened? And instead of just running around in a panic about the way the world's going, it's a completely different way of looking at the world, and that's where the solutions lie, Jimmy. If people try to find solutions to what's happening in the five sense world within the five sense world, they're not going to find them. It's like watching a movie on a screen and trying to find solutions in the movie to change the movie. The movie's hit the screen. It's a done deal. It's not going to change. You've got to go back and find out where this movie's being projected from, change that, and then the movie must change. And in terms of the world, going back to find the projection is to go into ourselves and find that infinite self beyond the phantom self, and change what we're projecting into the world. Because if we're projecting fear, if we're projecting conflict, if we're projecting us and them, then we're not part of any solution. We're massively part of the problem. It's us that have to change. So many people say, oh, you talk about the problem, but you don't talk about the solution. I talk about the solution all the time. It's that people often don't want to hear it because it involves them looking in the mirror and saying, how am I contributing to the problem? How can I contribute to a solution to it? And people don't want to do that. They want a list of things to be done, and they want someone to take the minutes. That's not going to change anything. Just as the elections are not going to change anything, because they're just a sideshow. We have to change ourselves and the way we interact with the world, interact with each other, and then the world must change.
And that's exactly, and that's such a great point, because I tell my audience, David, every single day, when you watch the news, take the story, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It could be a football match, it could be cars, it could be politics. Take the story, flip it over 180 degrees, and read it backwards, and you're closer to the truth. And it sounds like what do you do? Because you have to observe and listen to the world. What do you do as you acquire the news every single day? Do you do exactly that, flip it over 180 degrees and try to get closer to the truth?
Well, you make a very good point, Jimmy, because I've written a lot of my books over the years about how the world is an inversion. If you look at what we call evil, it's an inversion of life. In fact, appropriately, evil is live written backwards. Everything's inverted. And so obviously the news is going to be inverted. But I tell you one of the processes that I go through. When I started out on this a long time ago now, I wanted to know, I realized that a few controlled the many. I wanted to know how they did it. And so I was looking for a number of things. A, where does this hidden hand want to take the world? And B, what are the techniques that are used to take us there? And so what I came up with in terms of an understanding of this is where they want to take the world is to what I call the Hunger Games society. And this is a structure whereby at the top are the less than 1%, not even 1%. At the bottom are the rest of humanity in slavery and levels of poverty. And I call it the Hunger Games Society because of the Hunger Games movies, which basically portrayed this kind of society. And in the middle, between the less than 1% and the mass of slaves, is the strata of the police state, the global police state, which is where they're heading, to hold that status quo in place. And when you've got that structure in your mind of where this agenda wants to take us, then when you watch the news and you watch world events and you watch the problem reaction solutions and what the solutions offered are, it is extraordinary. Day after day after day, the solutions and world events and political pronouncements take us ever closer to that structure I've just described. So, for instance, in the financial arena, you have people, great numbers, more and more in the West, in poverty and forms of homelessness and often abject poverty, caused by the crashing of the banking system in 2008, then the hosing of vast amounts of money at the banks and the less than 1% through governments, which the less than 1% control, from the people, in effect, who are stuck with the responsibility for the money. That allowed governments to transfer fantastic amounts of money from the people, in effect, in terms of their responsibility to pay it back, through governments to the less than 1%. And then to be able to say, well, you know, we're in terrible financial trouble now. We've got to have programs of austerity on the people who have bailed out the banks and the less than 1%, in effect. And so that has taken us a big step closer to this mass poverty slavery situation that this Hunger Games society demands. But of course, you then have still a significant number of people who are well off or even very well off, who are not part of this less than 1%, and the less than 1% want what they have too. So what they've done financially is move, and this happened particularly after a banking crash in Cyprus. They've moved from bailouts of failed banks, and what they're moving to now is bail-ins. And bail-ins are, if a bank crashes or there's a massive financial crash, which is what they're planning, then instead of governments bailing out the banks in the way that they have before, the authorities can go direct to the bank accounts of the depositors in those banks and take their money to bail out the bank. In other words, this is a great example in Cyprus. When they introduced the bail-in, when Cyprus banks crashed, people were guaranteed, as they are in the EU, something like 100,000 euros are guaranteed. If it's in your bank account, then that's guaranteed by the authorities, the EU, etc. If the bank crashes, anything above that is not guaranteed. So what happened in Cyprus is people who had a lot of money in those banks and will be considered very well off and no problem, and all this austerity and stuff doesn't affect me. Well, they were a lot less rich when they did that bail-in, because something like 80% of the money above the 100,000 euros was just taken to bail out the banks, stolen by the authorities. And this has set the precedent for how they are going to deal with future banking crashes. And what this is doing is targeting those with money and are comfortable and seem to be secure, but are not part of the less than 1%, to take their money as well. So when you realize that this goal of this Hunger Games society is there, then when you're watching the news and you're seeing world events unfold, you can keep taking those events and those solutions and those political changes of policy, and you can put them into that Hunger Games society structure day after day after day, because that's the way it's moving. And of course, people have seen very clearly in the not too far back how far the police state has moved on, how far impositions have moved on, how far the police state personnel and organizations have not only got more vicious and more psychopathic, but are growing and growing in size and reach. That, and it's happening in Britain as much as in North America and elsewhere. That is the police state strata being put into place that is designed to hold the status quo of the less than 1% controlling everybody else. This is what is happening. And the other thing in terms of finance is the cashless society. The cashless society is all part of this Hunger Games society, where through having no cash that you can hold, the less than 1% and the institutions they control will control every form of money and know everything you spend. And because it will be entirely electronic, they can wipe away what you appear to own anytime they choose. So that structure is if people keep that in their minds, they'll see it moving in that direction every time they turn on the news.
The flip of a switch will turn you into a nobody. And begging on the street will do no good, because nobody's going to, bounce a credit card into your hand, and there's no cash to beg for. And that's one of the most frightening concepts out there, but it would literally be the flip of a switch.
Yeah, exactly that. And the idea, of course, of taking people's money and resources as people. I mean, how many people, Jimmy, are in America today, in America tonight, sleeping in the streets, who not long ago had what they would call a good middle-class job and a decent income?
Way too many.
How quickly it can happen. I mean, you describe it very well in terms of the flick of the switch. And what that creates is dependency. This is the crucial thing. Dependency equals control. And so the idea is to create dependency in all areas of our lives, so that we are at the beholding of the state. Okay, you've got no money. You want to eat? Okay, you do what the state tells you. You want to drink? You want some water? You do what the state tells you. And this is the process we're going into. And the reason I've spent all these years doing everything I can to highlight it is to alert people to what the plan is, so that we, going back to what we talked about earlier, people can intervene in it by seeing where it's leading. I mean, we can walk down a path with a sheer cliff drop at the end of it, and we can stop a mile away or we can go to the edge and be teetering over the brink. And when you're starting to lose your balance, teetering over the brink, it's a lot harder to not fall than it would have been if you'd have turned round a mile away. And so the closer we get to it, the more this control and dependency will be impacting upon people, and the more challenging it will be to turn it around. That's why, this is about today, not about tomorrow. This is not sometime over the rainbow. This is happening now, and we need to address it now. Otherwise, there's a natural end to this. There is an outcome to this, and that is what I'm describing will happen. It doesn't have to, but it will if there's not massive intervention by people waking up to it and seeing where it's going.
You have literally millions of followers. Fans is the wrong word. I will say followers, and people that respect what you say around the world. And certainly governments around the world are aware of you. And you're about to embark on a world tour. And they must be, at some point, a little reticent to allow you into the country, if you know what I mean. And then I read and heard something about something going on with Australia, that they probably weren't too happy about you going there. What's the real story behind that, and what happened?
Well, Australia's interesting, and so is Canada. I've not been able to speak in Canada since about 2001.
Yeah, they wouldn't let me into Canada too. So there you go.
Yeah,
but
and then you then ask people about Canada, and you ask people about Australia, and they say, yeah, they're democratic free countries, And if you look what's happening in Australia now, it's extraordinary. You've got a situation where the people on state benefits are told their benefits will be cut if they don't have their children vaccinated according to the whole vaccination list and protocol that the government demands. It's absolutely extraordinary. What more definition of fascism do people want? And so, because it's a global web, it's like a spider. There's a spider in the center of the web. That's the force that's orchestrating it globally. And then you have the web, and the web, different strands of the web are secret societies, government agencies, all this whole web of organizations. And so because it's a global web, it goes into every country. And thus, I kind of see the same things happening everywhere all the time because it's centrally coordinated, just like McDonald's has a headquarters in America or some other corporation and dictates to all its subsidiaries. So all the subsidiaries operate according to the diktat of the headquarters. It's the same how this web works. And so when I go into Canada or into Australia, the same force or the force in each country that doesn't really want me there is the same force operating through Canada and operating through Australia, what have you. So what happened with Australia is that when I went there a few years ago to speak in Melbourne in 2011, I turned up at the airport, and it was a strange thing because I was stopped at immigration, and I was taken into this room. And I'm not kidding you, Jimmy. It was straight out The Matrix. You know that room where Neo is being interviewed, and it's got its bright white walls and stuff like that.
Agent Anderson.
It was just like that. I thought I'm in The Matrix, And I was asked to sign a letter to say that I'd read the letter. What it said was that if I create discord in Australia, then I could be thrown out of the country and not allowed back in. And when you look at the definition of discord, well, crikey, everyone's causing discord all the time. I have a different opinion to someone else. Anyway, they let me in, and I spoke there, and then I kind of left, and I went back. No,
well, let me ask you, David, let me jump in. Did it cause you to change your message? Were you then conscious of, to that definition of discord? Did you lift your foot off the gas pedal a little bit?
Didn't change a word.
That's what I'm talking about. Okay, go ahead.
And what I did at the start of the talk, actually it was in 2009 or 2011 in Melbourne, is that I went through the whole story of what had happened and how ludicrous it was, and I was making fun of Discord all the way through the talk, because the thing is that if we are going to be in our power, then we have to speak our truth. And how people receive that truth is entirely up to them. That's their free choice and their free right. But it's our right to speak our truth. And just because someone in a uniform gives me a letter and warns me about creating discord, doesn't mean I'm going to change anything. I'm not. I will say what I believe, and the consequences will follow. Once we start editing and censoring ourselves because of, here's the word again, Jimmy, fear of consequences, then we are being absorbed into this fear-based system of control. I will not have it. And so in 2011, I went back and I did a lot of events like I'm doing this time in Perth and Brisbane and Sydney and Melbourne. And I turn up at the airport again, and I'm standing in line. And when I stood in line, quite a few lines at the immigration, there was a guy in uniform behind who I saw specifically move and stand behind the immigration desk facing my line. So I thought, well, I've seen that before. So what I did is then I moved my line just to have a bit of fun. And he moved and stood behind that line. So I thought, okay, we're gonna have a situation here.
Yeah, here we go.
And I don't know what happened, because I got to the desk and they took one look at my passport and handed it to the guy behind who was there. And then I was asked a load of questions and stuff like that, and they went off into some office in the back, leaving me there, sitting there. And then they came back about 10 minutes later, and I don't know what had happened in between. But you know, they were so overly nice. I thought, this person has shape-shifted. What have you done? This person has just transformed their personality in 10 minutes.
Right.
Oh, have a good trip. And I don't know what happened there. And so I went and did it. And then this time, each time when I've asked for a visa to get in, it's taken longer. This time, it took months. In fact, funnily enough, I think it was September time that I applied for the visa to go and do this speaking tour this time. And it was January before it came through. And I had a conversation with the people who were organizing, and we came to the conclusion that if we didn't get the visa through in 48 hours, then we're going to have to pull it, because there wasn't enough run-up time. And 24 hours later, it came through, to our great delight. And so I'm going in. What will happen when I get there? I mean, I've been stopped so many times at immigration in Canada and Australia. They asked me to the Christmas party. You know what I mean?
Right.
But those two countries are particularly bad for me.
They get you got the visa without an asterisk next to it. There was no preconditions.
No, not so far. I've not gone in there yet. But whatever the preconditions are, if they involve not saying what I believe, then I'm still going to say what I believe, because it's very important. The worst kind of censorship is self-censorship, and so much of that goes on in the mainstream media. I worked in the mainstream media for a long time. I saw it all the time. It's this understanding that if you say this, or you expose this, or you do this, there are going to be consequences. And also, it's not going to get in the paper or on the broadcast anyway. It's going to get spiked. So there's no point. So journalists then start to self-censor and just operate within the parameters of what's acceptable to the media organization. And that's the worst kind, because at least open censorship can be seen. See, they're censoring that. Self-censorship, it's happening in the shadows. People don't see it. And that's the worst kind. And the people who are exposing what's happening outside of the mainstream absolutely must not fold and concede to self-censorship. It's a very dark road, that one.
One of the things that you address, and I think you do it well, very effectively, is when you talk about us living in not only the matrix, but a large quantum computer and Wi-Fi signals and digital, and I talked about it in the opening of the show. And it's one of the things for me that just opens up my eyes. And can you share a little bit of that with the audience as we start to close out here? And thank you for hanging on for a little bit. But I think it's an important message. And when people question the reality that they live in, or if that this is even possible, the way that you paint that picture, I think allows us to understand it a little bit more.
Yeah, well, on the world tour, I'm going to go into this in some detail, as I do in Phantom Self, because this is something that's really come to me very vividly over the last, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, actually even further back, and that's that we live in an equivalent of a quantum computer video game, if you like. And it's amazing how the reality that we're experiencing and the emerging technologies mirror each other. And it makes the job of people like me much easier because, unlike the shamans of the past, I have analogies in symbolizing reality in the very technology that people are using all the time. This quantum universe is like, in simplest terms, it's like a Wi-Fi field or a series of Wi-Fi fields. And I'm sitting in front of a computer now, and I'm seeing pictures and graphics and words on the screen. But what's actually happening is that is simply a decoded reality. Actually, in terms of the internet, it's a collective global reality that is decoded from information. I mean, if my flat here had Wi-Fi, and I said to people who didn't know about computers, there's a whole worldwide reality in the space that you're standing in, they'd say you're crazy, you're mad. I can't see it. Where is it? But because we know about computers, people have no problem with that. Oh, Wi-Fi, yeah, I understand that. Yeah, and it's in the atmosphere, and the computer decodes that. Yeah, I understand that. Well, as I've been writing for a long time, the body is a biological computer. It is interacting with these fields and decoding a reality from them. People who are caught in the five sense world, they think all this is real, but it's not. The only place that this reality exists in the way that we experience it is in the brain, where information is decoded from electrical information into visual information by the visual parts of the brain. What we think is outside of us is actually inside of us. And so this whole concept of us living in a matrix, computer-like reality has been picked up by a number of scientists and scientific studies around the world now, who are concluding the same. Do you know, as some of them have pointed out, that they found equations in the fabric of our reality that are, quote, indistinguishable from those that drive search engines and browsers. There's a guy called Max Tegmark, who is at MIT, who has pointed out that the universe can be entirely described by numbers and maths in the same way that a video game is encoded. So what we're getting, then there's also a project at the University of Bonn in Germany, which is exploring and concluding that actually this is a video game type reality. And I go into this in Phantom Self, and I will in the talks at some length, because it's the control of this video game, control of this information, that actually when you get deep in the rabbit hole, it's where this whole human control is coming from. And if you think of a Wi-Fi field, and then you think of the totality of it, if you could decode the totality of a Wi-Fi field, you would be decoding, having access to masses and masses of information, and thus insight from that information. But if you are only decoding a fraction of that Wi-Fi field, you are going to access a fraction of the potential information, and thus a fraction of the potential insight. And this is where we come back to focusing attention on the five senses. If you only interact with this reality on the five senses level, you are accessing a fraction of what is there to access if you expanded your awareness and started to interact with it in a much more expanded way. So when you get into this whole concept of the fact that we do live in a technologically manufactured reality, very much akin to the portrayal in the Matrix movies, it starts to make amazing sense of the world that we live in, and why what happens, and why things are as they are. See, for me, what we call the speed of light, which we can't go beyond, well, actually we can, but the speed of light, for me, is the wall of the Matrix. And when we get close to the speed of light, things start to go out of kilter. Things start to be act very strangely. The time starts to change, etc. And for me, that's because the biological computer, what we call the body, is reaching the outer limit of what it can decode and interact with, and thus things start to become very strange in terms of what happens. And beyond this speed of light, which is pedestrian compared with what's possible, that's the reality beyond the Matrix. And it's something that I've looked at in great detail, especially in more recent times, in terms of the detailed information to support this concept. And it is extraordinary how the information and evidence is there. I mean, Texmark is talking about the fact that when you move your body, when you move your arms, what is happening in terms of physics is just the same as when a character in a computer game does the same thing.
That's right.
It's extraordinary, but it doesn't half explain the world and why the world is as it is and why people are as they are. But if, again, we come back to it, if people can move their point of attention, their point of observation into infinite awareness, that's not in the Matrix. That's outside of the Matrix. It's observing the Matrix. It knows about the Matrix. It can see it. And thus you start then, because you're coming from that point of observation instead of being in this world and of it through the five senses, you start to see it. It becomes so obvious and so plain what the deal is about the reality we're experiencing and what's behind it. That's where the answer lies, and that's where you could see what you can never see if you're in the game and of the game.
You know what's really frightening, to talk about fear, is DARPA's number one project focus for quite a few years now is AI and AR. That's all of their budget focus is on a computer interface between us and consciousness and communicating with quantum computers. And if that is what they're dealing with now, and that's what they're telling us, then they've been already doing it for a long, long time. And their only concern and their only focus is creating and perfecting that artificial reality. And isn't that just about as scary of a thought as you can think of?
Well, I mean, I could talk for another 2 hours on that question alone, because it is fundamental, Jimmy. It's such a fundamental point. And in Phantom Self and on the world tour, I'll absolutely go into this in some detail, because DARPA is one of the most, if not the most, sinister organization on earth, and it works very closely in concert with Google. People think of Google and they think of a search engine. Actually, Google is far, far, far more than that. Google is a monster, and fundamentally part of this whole control system that's unfolding. And Google, of course, has changed the name of much of its company to Alphabet to try to hide the extent of what it's doing. It is building robots. It is building robotic soldiers for the robot army I've been writing about for years that they plan. And it's massively involved in this whole transhumanist AI agenda. So suddenly, when the head of DARPA, a lady called Regina Duggan, leaves DARPA and moves to become an executive of Google, it's a very strange career move on the face of it, but when you know what's going on, it's perfectly explainable, because she's just moving from one expression of this agenda to another. And what I explain in Phantom Self, and this is kind of a whole program in itself, and what I will go into in the talks in detail, is how we are being led along a process from becoming addicted to technology that we hold, to being moved on to what they call wearables. These are the Apple watches, the smart watches, anything that has smart in front of it, alarm bells go off, because all smart technology is designed to communicate with other smart technology, creating a smart grid, which is what they are in the process of doing. So you've got your smart watch, you've got your Bluetooth on your ear, you've got your Google Glass. These are the wearables. These are just pulling us along, come on, kitty, 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 from holding technology to having it on the body. And the next stage is already happening, is what they call implantables. That's getting that technology inside of people. And isn't it great? I've got this, I put this chip in, all this stuff. It's all a mind game, leading people along to get technology inside their bodies. And the idea is to connect human awareness, human consciousness, human mind, brain, body, whatever, the human biological computer, to a technological sub-reality. Now, I've been talking and writing about the technological sub-reality for a long, long time, way back. And now people like Ray Kurzweil, who is a Google executive and a frontman for Frankenstein, one of the great promoters of this transhumanist agenda, and he's selling it as humans becoming superhuman. What he's actually talking about, and he will know it, is humans becoming subhuman, becoming simply a computer terminal on a technological sub-reality web. And the term he uses for the sub-reality is the cloud. And he said openly that by 2030, humans will be thinking from the cloud. They will be connected to the cloud, and the cloud will be doing their thinking. And as time passes, less and less of the human will be involved until the cloud is doing all the thinking. And we'll be superhuman. No, you'll be a computer terminal. And what this is doing, and the chapter in Phantom Self where I detail this, is called transphantomism. And I call it that because the idea is, as you describe in terms of what DARPA is doing, it's to take people to the next step. At the moment, the program, the psychological perception program, is focusing people on the five senses at the expense of influence and awareness of the infinite expanded self. What transhumanism or transphantomism is about is going beyond the phantom. It's linking the body mind, what I call phantom self now, to this cloud. So the disconnection of incarnate humanity from infinite awareness becomes virtually total by this middle intervention of the cloud, the technological sub-reality. That's where it's leading, and people are so addicted to technology. You can see it now. This force that's behind it, I describe as like a computer virus. It's a ultimately, it takes many forms, but ultimately it is a self-aware, that's the important thing, a self-aware computer virus. And I was interested, I've been watching a series coming out of America, a very good series, called Through the Wormhole, fronted up by Morgan Freeman. And I've been watching some of the latest ones in the last few days. And there was, they talked to scientists, but fortunately it's scientists who are asking real questions rather than the mainstream where they don't. And there's one scientist, I think Michigan State University, who's actually exploring this whole area of digital life, digital awareness, how digital technology can be aware, and be able to interact with the world, in effect, to be able to think. Now, what I'm talking about is a much more expanded version of that, where it's literally a self-aware, computer virus is as near as I can symbolize it. And it needs the ability to express itself in this reality. Now, for me, this virus has infected humanity, has been systematically implanted in reality way back when you see all these ancient stories of the gods intervening in human genetics and interbreeding with the gods. And I think there's a very good chance that this whole theme of being born with original sin in religion is actually referring to this virus, which is passed on from generation to generation. And this smart grid, this cloud, this AI world. I mean, what are they saying, Jimmy, all the time now? As you rightly say, it's artificial intelligence. Everything's going to be run by artificial intelligence. It's going to be great. All the cities are going to be run by artificial intelligence. Everything is. The question is, what is this artificial intelligence? What is it? What is it? I don't see people asking that. Oh, artificial intelligence, yeah. But what is it? And I would suggest that what's being created is a technological vehicle for this self-aware, quote, computer virus to take the world over completely by having everyone, humans, even down to your fridge, being connected to the internet, run by artificial intelligence. Everything is being connected to the internet. I mean, the CIA talk about the Internet of Things, where everything is connected to the internet, and it's what's happening now. And once that has been created, and humans through this transhumanist technology are also connected to the internet, then whoever controls whatever controls the internet controls everything. And I would strongly suggest that what is designed to control that internet, thus everything, is this artificial intelligence, which is this computer virus, self-aware computer virus that I'm talking about. That's where all this is leading, and it's leading there so fast. And that's why these next 3-4 years are so important, because this transhumanist agenda is moving on so fast. And people must be aware of where it's leading. Otherwise, it will get to where it wants to go.
I have a friend who writes code, and I was speaking to him about a month ago. What are you guys working on? And this is what he said, David, and I hope you're sitting down. He said that they are writing code right now for a mirror, a bathroom mirror. They're writing code. Now, think about the implications of that. For a lot of different things. Obviously, to see the internet, your schedule, the news, and what you're doing, cameras looking back at you from the mirror, frightening,
Yeah.
right? And then he said this. This is what he followed up with. And chew on this. They're writing code for a toothbrush. And I said, wait a minute. He goes, Jimmy, man, it's going to be great. You know, you have to think about it. Your toothbrush is communicating with the software back on the internet, and it's monitoring how much you're brushing, how, when, pressure, and it will tell you. And I'm just, oh, wait, what? You know, and they don't know where to stop right now, David. There is no wall in front of them. The Internet of Things is here, and if they're writing code for toothbrushes, they're writing code for everything.
And another thing is that DARPA actually claim credit for creating the internet. And DARPA does not create anything unless it is to advance this agenda. The internet, in Fans himself, I quote a guy who was speaking, an insider, who was speaking in 1969, and he described the internet, what was coming. He was talking to a group of doctors in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1969, and detailing how the world was going to change. And the accuracy of what he said compared with what is happening is stunning. And I'm going to quote him a few times in the world tour. So he was describing the internet, and he was describing smart TVs that can, film you in your own front rooms. Back in 1969. And of course, Orwell was talking about smart TVs, and he was calling them telescreens, where they were filming you in your own home. And the reason that he could say it in a book that came out in 1948, and this other guy could say it in 1969, is going back to where we started. If you have access to the projected agenda, then unless something intervenes to stop it, that is going to happen. And that is what is unfolding. The idea is that humans have no capacity whatsoever to think, perceive, feel that hasn't come from this technological grid, this cloud. That is what is happening before our eyes. And that will be total and utter control. And that's why we need to head this off and fast.
I want to thank you for coming on tonight. Now, we have to address a few things about you, the different shows around the world, number one. Number two, give me your 60-second take really quick before we get to the world tour, and I'm going to get you to commit to allowing me to give away some tickets, too, as well.
Right, no problem.
Yeah, you can't say no. Putting you on the spot. Is this, the Queen Mother just turned 290 years old. Okay, now, and I say that in jest, but I'm also not playing around with